The moment is here, you can stop your search. It's Comics by Perch.
Hey everybody, this is Perch. Well, I think with enough of the sales numbers and everything in, we can definitively state that the X-Men Krakoa era is not a top seller. In fact, worse than that, it's probably one of their worst runs in terms of trade paperback omnibus sales. Now, is that exaggeration? It's a little bit exaggeration, because in several cases they didn't aggressively print trade paperbacks of the X-Men run. So it's not exactly apples to apples. I feel like the trade paperback sales of the Hickman Krakoa era are probably higher than the Chuck Austen sales in trade paperback. However, it's worth noting that the individual floppy sales of the much derided, and it was shitty, Chuck Austen run of the X-Men were higher on a month-by-month floppy basis than, I was going to say, the majority of the Krakoa line, but I think, based on at least some numbers that y'all sent me, all, including the main title, including X-Men, Jerry Duggan's X-Men sells poorer than Chuck Austen's X-Men. Now, you can make lots of arguments for why it's not a fair comparison. It was a different time. The X-Men were hotter back then, blah, 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 blah. You can do a lot of things, but here's the thing. Sales and just pure commercial numbers tend to be the great kind of arbiter of, what's performing and what isn't. We can argue with them. We can say there's reasons behind this or that, but at the end of the day, cash coming in is what counts. And right now, if you're a comic shop, investing in selling the Krakoa era X-Men is not a good investment for you. It's not doing well for you. Full stop. I mean, look, we can pretend and argue and say we like it better, and that's all fine. Keep in mind, liking it better doesn't equate to everyone likes it better. And that's a tough lesson for people to learn. And they seem to, need to learn it on a regular basis. But right now, the reality, this era is doing terribly. And so I did this video about Reddit was saying that you can't go back now that we've put in Krakoa. Anything going back at all would be reductive. And from a storytelling perspective, I mean, honestly, that seems kind of binary. It seems like, we either have the story you have, or we have to tell exactly what we had before. And that's all. Those are only two options. Okay, there is no third option. And this is just kind of this is the genius of the comics subreddit, which can only think in very, very binary terms. But people should be non-binary. No, see what I did there? Anyway. But it doesn't line up to facts. At this point, Marvel desperately needs to get out of the Krakoa era. Now, we can say that, hey, this was Hickman's kind of brainchild, and with no Hickman in it, that's why we have to change, because, I mean, look, and maybe you're right. Maybe you did need Hickman steering it under his direction to maintain things, but the sales had softened significantly when Hickman made his exit. At the end of the day, this is a problem. Again, I did this video on Reddit. A bunch of you sent in, numbers. And, here's an example of one. There is no X-Men trade paperback, none, on Amazon's Marvel Top 50 list. Let alone, by the way, the overall comics Top 50 list. Remember, Marvel is a subsection of the comic graphic novels. So that's much, much worse. There is no X-Men, period. The first one comes in at number 52 with a 90s epic collection, which has been out for a little while. Hox Pox is at number 72, and Hickman's Omnibus is lower, but that's all from this era on there. 7 X titles total in the Marvel list. Now, just let that sink in for a moment. And if you love the Hickman era of X-Men, cool, good for you. But that's not good news. You have to acknowledge that is a really bad sign. Nothing in the top 50. Nothing. There is no argument that can be made to say that this is this era is working. This storytelling is working. It is clearly not. Again, from a sales perspective, is it working for you? On a literary perspective, maybe. Do you just like this era because it just fits? Cool. But there is nothing. And by the way, you can make this is why that that argument is so devastating. Because it's not just, you can say, well, comics don't sell as well, or well, the interest is peaked. Well, the MCU has burned it all out. The X-Men aren't in the MCU. And again, we didn't talk dollars. We didn't say, compared to the 2005 sales, things are down. There's no sales comparison. This is purely units sold. Nothing X-Men related in the top 50. Nothing for Marvel. That's that's not an indicate. There's no sliding scale. And by the way, there have been X-Men collections released recently, so it's not an aging out factor either. Lots of other things on that list, from old collections, different omnibuses, hell, even the much locked Jason Aaron Avengers run has some things in there. And keep in mind, this is a series that we are told to believe is oversaturated due to the MCU. But even that is beating the X-Men. So how did it get here? I think there's a bunch of different reasons, but the biggest probably is nothing happens. Nothing. And when I say nothing happens, I mean from a action comic book perspective. And let's say you love the slice of life stuff. I'm a Rumiko Takahashi fan myself. I feel you. But it doesn't really matter what I like, what I don't like. This era is not exciting. This is mutants hanging out, having dinner, discussing kind of the efficacy of, being reborn on a constant basis. A lot of what you would generally see as a backup story in the X-Men days in the past, where like the action happens in the first side of the story, and the backup story, like, let's figure out how, what happens when the White Queen has dinner with her clothing designer. Like that's where we're at. Open up an X-Men book right now, and there is even going into space and fighting the Brood has pages upon pages where they are not fighting the Brood. They're just standing around. When they went to go see Brew, when they thought that the Brood were upset, Jean Grey's over there with magic, and they spend multiple pages with Brew sunbathing, teaching the Brew, pets he has under his control to do the Thriller dance, magic cheering on and dancing with them. Long conversations about this. It is an action comic genre. It was not made to be webtoon slice of life. It probably would do better there if it was starting from scratch, but it's not. We've had convoluted storylines where the pit is supposedly the really bad thing, but saber-toothed people escape from the pit. And hey, we're going to throw the X-Men Green in there after they break one of the key rules of Krakoa. This is, by the way, I believe Jerry Duggan who did that story. And they're immediately let out. Krakoa says go out, have fun. If you kill some people, it'll be fun. Like literally, there's no consequences to anything. Obviously, the death part is an issue. That death holds no meaning. This takes it a step further, where it's not just death that holds meaning; nothing holds any meaning. In Sins of Sinister, they send they're like Professor X and Emma and Hope and Exodus. They've all been infected with the Sinister gene, so we're gonna have to send them down into the pit until they get better. Next week, 1 week later, they're out now. Everything's fine. We built a machine. They're good. They're good. 1 week. Stories with no consequences fail. Again, whether you like the comic, hate the comic, love the X-Men, like all the talking, like the Blob's Tiki Bar, whether you like all these things, like Wolverine surfing on an adamantium surfboard for no fucking good reason, given that we've had hundreds, seemingly hundreds of comics. I don't know if it's been that many, but it's been dozens of comics showing that Wolverine's heavy-ass skeleton is a liability in water because it doesn't float, because it's a giant fucking steel. But, adamantium surfboard, it's fine. What's the logic behind it? Well, it's just coating a surfboard, which means it's sharp enough to cut through rocks, which we show you in the comic, but still lightweight enough because it's got a hollow set. That's not how science works, it dumbasses. Anyway, this is when you remove all consequences and all stakes, you get vegetarian bullshit. No, I mean you get no story that has any meaning. And when you don't have a story that doesn't have any meaning, the sales slip. And again, of course the sales are going to slip. They're going to slip because it doesn't matter whether you buy the comic or not. And that is the message. That's the message to the people collecting the comic, buying the comic. It doesn't really matter. Yes, it was kind of funny to eliminate death in the comic. To just say, none of the mutants can die now. And that'll be fun. And then we'll figure out, that won't have any lasting consequences. It'll be fine. Now what will happen? I remember Hickman gave an interview where he said, people are always returning from the grave, and no X-Men will stay dead, to the point that it's become a joke that, when's this person getting resurrected? So I decided to just, flip that on its ear a little bit and just let's just say, yeah, nobody can die. Just bring them all back. See what happens then. What happens is it sucks. That's what happens. And so here we are with a comic with no stakes, no consequences, and no sales. This is how you kill a comic. The bizarre part is how Marvel seems to be, and DC and others, seems to be galloping after this as fast as they possibly can. It's like, oh, this comic has no lasting consequences at all? Fuck. Can the Justice League be more like that? Let's try it out. How about what other comics can we make like this? I don't know. Somebody at Marvel, they're doing an interview, and they're talking about the new Avengers series, the Jed McKay series. They're like, oh, can Jed McKay capture some of the magic that the X-Men lineup with the Krakoa era has? I hope not. Marvel shouldn't hope for so either. If he captures that magic, then the whole series is going to take. This series is in bad shape, but it's somewhat of a absolutely picture perfect list of what not to do in comics. Remove all consequences of everything: death, adventures. Take the villains away. Say the villains are part of the heroes now. Everything's fine. Don't just overtly say we're removing all the villains from the board and we're going to replace them with generic kind of humans that don't like mutants for reasons. And a couple of them are robots. We got a couple of robots and a bunch of humans. All the scientists teamed up together because fuck those mutants. That's the villain now. The villain, there aren't, you have Nimrod there, but the majority of the other villains are just like guys, like running around in costume. Like I've got a costume with like a little Orcus looking flower logo on there. I'm a villain. They like, oh, we're going to need an actual villain. I know. Jerry Duggan's like, we'll make Dr. Stasis. That'll be our new villain. Oh, no, that's a clone of Mr. Sinister. Shit, man. What are you doing? Where are the villains? The Children of the Vault are teased as some unique villains. And then they go back to that rarely. So take away all consequences, take away all stakes, take away all the villains, replace most of the comics with no action in a superhero action genre, and then just kind of randomly swap out the writers and the artists at their various times. Run a big event, your first really big event, 24 issues in this event, and then proceed to defy expectations by making most of the event fun games. And that's, look at, you go down, it's a checklist of what not to do if you want to lose all your sales. At this point, again, you may like all this stuff, and good for you if you do, but the sales say it sucks. It's certainly, if you're Marvel, you cannot be looking at this going, well, the sales numbers were all terrible, but at least Reddit likes it. Because, that's something. It's nothing. Thanks for listening.